Carolyn here. What's the play for today? Well, today's play came about because I was trying to explain something to somebody with words and they just weren't getting it. And that led me to grabbing some art supplies. See, it started out by looking at some clouds. I'm on the phone talking to them, and suddenly one layer of clouds goes by and you could see the other layer behind it. And it just lit me up. I was like, wow, this is incredible. And I'm trying to explain the magic of it. And they were like, yeah. They just didn't get it. And words just weren't coming to me that could convey it. And so it felt like I was kind of talking in polka dots. Like, how would somebody understand me if I talked in polka dots? Well, that led me to thinking about that. Could not let that thought out of my head. So I headed up to my art supplies to explore talking in polka dots. And that led me to these things, little speech bubbles made with polka dots that are reflecting wonderfully on the light here. So I hope you can see them. And so I'm going to show you how I made these and then what I use them in. I'm going to start by using some acrylic paint on Transparencies to get those polka dots all over there. And you might be thinking, hey, if that's just regular acrylic paint, is it going to scratch off easily? And yes, normally it might scratch off pretty easily, except there's going to be something that I do that makes it so the paint will never ever scratch off. I also want to have a bunch of these in various colors so that I can stack them one on top of the other. So after I do one there, I'm going to do some more. And the process is exactly the same. So I'm not going to make you watch me do a whole bunch of these. But let's just say I found it a little addictive as I was doing this because I wanted to see how all the different colors would layer and play together. The stencils that I'm playing with here, these are from the July 2026 Stencil Club collection that I created for over at Stencil Girl Products. Now it's called spotted layers because these four were designed to be layered one on top of the other. And when you do that neatly and precisely and orderly, this is what it looks like. And exactly how I did this, I've got that in my last video, and I'll have that linked down below for you. But you can also do other things with them in an orderly way. This was done on a gel plate. Now, one of the things that I really love about stencils is the variety of ways you can use them. And another way you can use these is making these wonderful sort of shadowed circles using those. Now, how you do this one and this gel print, as well as 4 other techniques, that is all in the exclusive members only video that comes with the set. So if you join Stencil Club before the 15th of this month, you will not only get these stencils, but you also get that video where I show you different ways that I play with them. Because these stencils can be very orderly, or they can not be. They can be a lot looser. And that's what I'm going to be doing in this video, is I'm going to be playing around with them very, very loosely. I've got 4 of them here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play around with stacking them one on top of the other, auditioning them to see if I like how they look. Now I can use all the same size, all different sizes. I can use a combination of a few of these and a few of those. Anything goes with this. Now I'm just going to keep sliding these around until it gets to a point where it's saying what I want it to say when it feels the way I want it to feel. But Transparencies, they can be kind of slippery. So once I get it where I want it, I'm going to use a binder clip to hold these all in place. Here's the reason why the paint on these will never, ever, ever scratch. And that is because I've taken the painted side and I've put them inside. They're facing each other. So that means when this is all sewn together, there's nothing to scratch off because the paint's on the inside. But these are Transparencies and they are slippery, so I need to sew these things together so they don't slide. This is just a basic straight stitch along here. Nothing fancy, nothing perfect, just going around the edge. So this is going to basically hold these sheets together. And I am using black thread for a reason. I'll explain that in a moment. But one thing about the number of Transparencies that you do with this, I found my machine can easily handle 4. When I pushed it up to larger numbers, the needle just had a really hard time going through it. So do whatever you're comfortable with on your machine. I was good with 4 on this one, but again, do what fits you best. I made quite a few of these, having fun playing with the different color combinations. On some of them, I lined up the spots precisely. On some of them, I didn't. I was just experimenting, having fun, playing around with those Transparencies. Well, now they're ready to be turned into the speech bubbles. I'm going to be using a Stabilo pencil here to trace a stencil. And I like the Stabilo pencil because it writes really easily on top of the Transparency. And it'll be easy to remove in case I don't maybe stay on the lines. Yeah, spoiler alert, I really have a hard time doing that. The stencil that I'm using here is one that I designed for the regular collection over at stencilgirlproducts.com. And by the way, when you're a member of Stencil Club, you do get 25% off all the stencils in the regular collection too. So one of those perks of being a member. This stencil is called Speech Bubbles. I think you can probably figure out why I named the stencil that. And not only do you get the stencil, but you also get the masks. So the areas inside each of those speech bubbles. So you end up with a lot of options when you're playing with that one. Once I've got all the speech bubbles traced, then my intention, which I guess you can tell from the way I said that it didn't go as planned, was to just do one quick bit of sewing on that line. I'm using a free motion foot here, and it's really simple. You simply just follow along where that line is and stitch. I can see exactly where the needle is, and somehow I've had my eyes in my hands my whole life, but getting them to work together and follow that line pretty much felt like rocket science. So as much as I tried to stay right on that line, did not hit the mark on that quite as well as what I'd hoped. And that kind of stuff happens to me all the time. So it doesn't bother me when I make those mistakes or screw stuff up, because I simply call it an oops, an outstanding opportunity presenting suddenly. And this definitely was a great opportunity because it looked terrible. I didn't really stay on the line in a bunch of places. So this time when I went back over it, I didn't try and stay on the line. I intentionally made some areas thicker or thinner. I tried to get the neat and precise out of it. And you know what? I really like this look a lot better than just one perfect line of stitching around it. And that's one of the really freeing things about mixed media, about art, about creative play, is there is no one single way to do it. There's no right way. It's really about whatever way you're enjoying or you like the feel of. Then it's just simply cut out that speech bubble. Now, I have found transparencies to be very slippery when I'm cutting them, so unless things are sewn together, things always move on me, and I don't like that. So that is why I do all this sewing and stitching down to hold stuff in place. But that, like everything when I'm creating, is personal preference. Now that I've got speech bubbles to talk in polka dots, I need somebody to do the talking. And this model from a magazine seemed perfect. Partially because she's just an easy fussy cut. I like ones that have very straight lines to make it quick and easy to cut them out. Since she's going to be talking in polka dots, I don't want her to be the only one saying that. So I want to have some really big polka dots in the background, that kind of thing. And so that's where tissue paper is my friend. Since I don't like to do more work than I have to, I took the tissue papers and I stacked them one on top of the other so that as I'm cutting out my wonky, very imperfect circles here, I will get a lot done quickly. Now, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with this. I'm not even sure what background I'm going to put them on. So that's why I just did a whole bunch of colors and a whole bunch of sizes. So I've got options. I've got the tissue paper, I've got her, and I've got her polka dot speech bubbles. Now I need a background. And instead of starting from scratch, I decided to raid my stash of canvases, and this one jumped out at me. It kind of called to me and says it fit the vibe of what I'm feeling today, so I'm going to use that one. And before anything gets glued down, I am going to audition all sorts of stuff. I have really sped up the camera here because I spent a while trying things in different places to see if it was giving me the feeling that I wanted it to feel. Now, there's a very serious look on her face, as if she's concentrating or it's very important to her that she convey the idea clearly. And then she's speaking in polka dots, and the world is full of polka dots. Now, I've done a ton of careful auditioning here to get this exactly where I want it, so do you think I'm actually going to glue it down in the same space? Well, that's my goal, but I don't always make my goal. So her and that orange polka dot, I love it, so I'm going to use that binder clip to hold that in place. But the rest of the stuff, I'm just going to do my very best. These bigger circles, I'm going to glue down half of it and then glue down the other half. But I'm also working with tissue paper, and tissue paper is thin paper that can tear pretty easily. So that means some things might tear or they might end up in a slightly different place. And that for me is just part of the process. Now the glue that I'm using, by the way, is Fluid Matte Medium, and I really like that one because it's a really runny glue. It's a very fluid glue. And so working with tissue paper, the thing that I find most important about a glue is that it's runny, that it's fluid. Now I'm feeling pretty confident that I'm going to be able to nail this and get all these pieces right where I want them to be until this little orange guy. That's a little bit of a reality check for me. But here's the thing. It's just a piece of tissue paper, and I've got a whole bunch more little tissue paper circles over there, so I'm simply going to scrape that one off and put a fresh one down there. Now keep in mind, my goal here is to have roundish type shapes, and well, that orange one doesn't look very round anymore, does it? Nope, doesn't to me either. But I kind of had to step away from it because the orange tissue paper was frustrating me. So that's why I went and worked on one of the bigger pieces. And as I'm working on the pink, yeah, that orange one's still bugging me. I'd really like it to be round. Since the glue is still wet, I'm going to give it another go. And I got to tell you, I really feel like I've accomplished something, that I'm able to get that orange tissue paper to stay in its round shape. And this is about when I realized I forgot to wipe the Stabilo pencil off of the speech bubbles. And I'm just using a wet paper towel here. As soon as that Stabilo gets wet, it will smear, blend, move. And so it's really easy to wipe off of there. Since my Stabilo pencil was black, that's why I like to use black thread for this, because it won't stain or make any marks on the thread. Basically, it just disappears. Working with colored tissue paper can be a lot of fun, but there's something to keep in mind when you're doing that, and that is it fades really easy in direct sunlight. So when I've got a bunch of tissue paper on something like a canvas like this, I like to seal it with a UV protector. That'll keep it from fading. And so I'm going to let everything dry once I've glued it down. So the magazine, the tissue paper, it's glued down, but again, letting it dry completely. And then I'm going to come in with a clear UV protector. When applying something that's clear, a wise person will do it in a very methodical way. Say working in solid lines from top to bottom, going from one side all the way over to the other. That way you know that you've covered every inch of the surface. And if you're thinking it doesn't look like I'm doing that, yeah, you're completely right. I'm sort of willy-nilly here, there, everywhere. Not really the wisest thing to do. But it's kind of how my mind works some days, so I roll with it. But that's also why I will go over this several times just to make sure that I've covered everything on it. All I had to do now was glue on the speech bubbles. And before I did that, I had this crazy idea. What if I cover it in resin? Now, you might be thinking that doesn't sound too crazy. And you're right, it's not crazy to cover it in resin, but it was crazy for me to do it this day with the constraints that I had. Because one, I was feeling very impatient, and two, I didn't have a lot of time. And so you're going to see what happens because of this. I'm going to share with you my resining. This, I will say, is not the kind of resin tutorial that I recommend that you follow. I'm going to be using art resin here, and if you've never done resin before, what it is two parts that you mix together. And you do need to mix them together precisely, meaning exactly 50 and 50, which is why I'm using a cup that has some marks on it, so I get the exact amount in there. And art resin has some great tutorials. They can walk you through all sorts of things with it. If you're interested in resin, check them out. And again, their tutorials are much better to follow than mine when it comes to this, because I'm not going to do the things that I really should do. Like one of the things you really should do when you're mixing the resin after you've got 2 equal parts in there is to gently stir it together for 3 minutes. And the reason why it's 3 minutes is because you want to make sure that it is completely and thoroughly mixed. The sides, the bottom, everything. Because any part that isn't thoroughly mixed is not going to cure correctly. Usually when I'm doing this, I set a timer for 3 minutes to make sure that I stir this for at least 3 minutes. And I was like, no, I can judge that myself. No, I really can't. So I'm living on the edge here, taking some unnecessary risks. Now that I think I've got the resin mixed up all the way, I'm going to put the canvas up here on some stands. And in a perfect world, in a wise world, you make sure that the surface is level so that when you've got that canvas, that panel, whatever it is you're resining, that it is level. Because I'm going to pour a liquid on here and spread it around. And if things aren't level, I think you can figure out what's going to happen is as it's curing, it's going to start sliding over to one side or running over the edge more than what I want. The other thing to keep in mind is that canvases are notoriously challenging to do when it comes to resin. And the reason for that is the center sometimes can sag from the weight of the resin, and then that will not distribute the resin the way that you think it should be when it's dry. Now, the way around that is you actually do a layer of resin on the back side of the canvas just to strengthen it up so that it won't sag. But there was no way I was going to wait around to do that because I was excited to put the resin on the top. The other thing that I like is to have the resin going over the sides of the canvas. And what that means is sometimes there can get resin on the back of it at the very bottom. And so to prevent that, what I do is I put masking tape down there to protect it. But you didn't see me do any masking tape because I didn't actually put any masking tape under this one because I was so excited to do it. I basically didn't do any of the basic prep work that I really should have taken the time to do. Once I've got the resin where I think I want it, I've got everything covered, then I leave it alone for 5-10 minutes and come back with a torch because what I want to do is pop any of the bubbles that have shown up. Now, art resin has approximately a 45-minute work time, and so about every 10-15 minutes during that time, in a perfect world, I come back and pop any of the bubbles that are coming up to the surface, because there are always some that come up. But today, I'm short on time, I need to leave, so I am simply going to put a plastic tub on top of this to prevent the dust, stuff in the air from settling on the resin while it's curing, and I'm just going to cross my fingers. And if you're thinking maybe that's not the most ideal strategy, I completely agree with you. That's why I say, do not follow what I do on this. Definitely follow what Art Resin says on their website. The moment of truth to find out whether or not I actually did mix the resin up well enough. Because if I did not mix it up well enough, it will stay sticky. If I did mix it up well enough the next day, it will be smooth and touchable. And I'm feeling pretty lucky because apparently the resin was mixed well enough. But the backside here, I really should have looked at it before I started pouring resin on it. But doesn't mean it's the end of the world because right now things are moderately fixable. That first day with resin, it's still a bit soft. It hasn't fully cured. So if I'm going to pull some of that off or take care of some of the big drips that are there that I didn't wipe away because I didn't come back and check it, then that's the kind of thing I'm going to do right now. I'm just going to bring in a knife and I'm going to trim those things off. If I do it within the first day, it's manageable. If I wait longer than that, the resin just becomes really, really rock hard and very difficult to do. And yeah, right now, I'm really wishing I'd taken, 2 minutes to just put the masking tape along the back, because if I'd done that, then all I would have to do is peel the masking tape off right now, and it would be perfectly smooth. But this is definitely an oops, an outstanding opportunity presenting suddenly, because if I'd actually remembered to do the tape on the back, I wouldn't be able to show you how to fix it if you ever forget it the way I do sometimes. Well, here's what it looks like now that I've glued on the speech bubbles. And I really appreciate those speech bubbles because they're covering up some air bubbles that showed up. Now, in a perfect world or a wise world, I would have come back with that torch while the resin was still workable to get some of those bubbles out before it set. But because I left, I didn't do that. So I did end up with a few more bubbles in here than I normally would have, but I've hidden an awful lot of them. So that one worked out. Well, thanks so much for being here for today's play. If you've enjoyed this video, I'd so appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. And of course, if you know of somebody that you think would enjoy this, share this video with them. Let them join in the fun too. And you can find everything that I'm up to over on my website at acolorfuljourney.com. And of course, if you want to know as soon as I have another video out, hit that subscribe button. Oh, and if you're brand new here, go check out all my other videos because I've got hundreds of them for you to look through. Well, thanks so much for letting me be a part of your colorful journey.